Hello there everyone, well it's good to be back making another archetype video and it's time to proceed now. This time we're going to look at a major archetype that signifies a mature ordering effect in the psyche that can be symbolically represented as the king. And I think that it's appropriate to talk about this one now because the others that we've covered in the form of the magician and the warrior, and also the shadow variants of the weakling and the tyrant, they all have their own way of speaking to this archetype directly in their own way. So you might say that we've been building up to this one because the king, as I said, symbolizes this late stage development effect in the psyche that can only come through a successive maturation of our raw ability, not only in the skills and projects that populate our private kingdoms, but in the very inner temperament of the psyche itself. The king represents a symbol, we could say, of our psychological maturity, an integration and an ordered totality within the psyche. And its culture form also represents a totality in that it symbolizes the image of the realm healthy, unified, and ready to take command of its own needs. So that's really a basic lay of the land when it comes to the king archetype. So let's now move on straight away and see what we can say a bit deeper about this one. When we think of kings, a few popular associations might likely spring to mind: authority, strength, wisdom, command, power, and most importantly, an ability to translate that power into an ordering effect that organizes the life of a certain area. It's for these reasons that the king is the archetypal image of an integrated personal psychology, which is simply to say a psychology that has satisfied its own demands for growth, a psyche which has come to truly know itself and translate that knowing into an order, a life code, a new pattern that represents a positive influence over both the inner and outer landscapes of human experience. If the magician represents our ability to decipher systems, and the warrior acts as our ability to engage and overcome those systems, then the king occupies the primal center in us that radiates the authority that commands it to be so. It is the organizing force that slowly articulates throughout one's life and orders our world together out of the chaos of competing states. Whilst we're developing throughout life, the king occupies the space within the citadel of the psyche that communicates the image of our mature potential. Here it radiates the image of what we might be if we were truly committed. We could also see this as relating to the unconscious psyche's way of conveying to the conscious intelligence an impression of the psyche's graduation towards positive integration. As we age, a general patterning effect occurs whereby our attention becomes more narrowed within a definite set of interests. We emerge out of the turbulence and impulsiveness of our past into a more concentrated definition of what our life is going to be. These are the early stages of the king in action, as an order gradually emerging out of the chaos of competing interests. But the archetype, like its culture form, is very demanding and relies upon an ordering effect that can only come through a gradual harnessing of our ability and a successful translation of that ability into a positive structuring of the various systems that encompass our life. It's for this reason why the archetype takes time to flourish, because it necessitates a deeper knowledge of ourselves and of our skill set, and also a successful overcoming of our inferior personal qualities that always try to convince us to take the easier path and remain in the wandering fantasies of our adolescent states. Therefore, The conversion of our life image into that of the king necessitates that we master ourselves and overcome the inferior patterns within our psychology that are inhibiting our own personal development. So the king can only come about through an agonizing and prolonged exercise of trial and error. This means that whilst we might achieve many great things in our adult life, maturity is not arrived at merely through an achievement of great acts, but by a deep psychological interiorization of our parts, that however it might evidence itself on the outside, actually emanates from a conversion that has happened invisibly and internally. This gradually translates into a newfound confidence and stability within our own nature. When we've claimed that command over our nature, we experience a peace and a stability where before there was a conflict. And that means we're finally in the position to translate that internal stability into the life systems around us, just as a good monarch does to the structure of their own realm. When we're younger, we often don't feel this security. We experience a confusion or a disorientation about our inner lives. And this can happen for many different reasons, of course, but it's partly due to the structuring effect that is occurring within our psyche. We have not yet deciphered the nature of our own patterns with our magician, nor worked with our warrior to overcome problems and work them into the systems that will come to symbolize the internal ordering that was enabling them all along. So the king conveys this deep flowering of internal empowerment that speaks to the psyche's motivation to seek to integrate its own components. And we see this notably in people that have it. They always speak from their centers, in their own true voice, and we feel secure in ourselves, or at least more secure in ourselves, simply by being in their presence. But like we've said, becoming a king is not easy, or by any means inevitable. As we'll speak about later on, its maturation is dependent upon a successive investment into our own lives. There's no reason why we will evoke the full force of the archetype simply because we've held a little responsibility or believe that we are good people for not being brave enough to do bad things. Like in the Arthurian legend of the sword and the stone, there are thousands of people who attempt to become kings and fail because they believe that brute force, Machiavellian manipulation, or material riches are the prime result of becoming a king. But this is a mistake, because a humble monk can own little and command no one, and yet still find ordered peace within his own mind's kingdom. Likewise, there are many people in life that convey power and find some measure of personal success, but ultimately their inner kingdom remains underdeveloped. They have not come to understand their own nature, and therefore they cannot command that nature. They are bejeweled princes and princesses of a private kingdom that they do not have the authority to maintain. And so they return to reassuring indulgences and narratives that convince them that all is well and that they are a good person. I now want to talk about the archetype with respect to its culture image and how it plays into the development of our life systems, because the patterns of the archetype are best evidenced in these areas. Let's think back to our remote past, in the darkest corners of human history, where we have small bands of humans gathering together around a campfire at night, surrounded by pitch darkness and the ominous sounds of the forest echoing around them. When you really think about it, that image offers a brilliant symbolic reading of our most primal experience of life. The camp is the known, the area of our effect, and the people that occupy it embody the familiar thoughts and systems that populate our conscious life. The darkness and the sounds of the forest represent the unknown variables of the world, and therefore they embody a challenge to the security of that which is known and familiar. And at the centre of that picture burns the primordial flame that centralizes our attention and illuminates the space where we can create a space for ourselves. This image positively associates to a part of what the king represents in our culture image. The king archetype has often been associated with the movements of heavenly bodies. If we look back into history, we see a common occurrence where human beings place an enormous cultural emphasis on the patterns of the sky, and even see the sky as representing a smooth, processional, ordering effect that we, as complex creatures, should seek to emulate. This is why the king is often seen as an embodiment of the sun, and the courtiers are the planets, and the realm is the space that the king's primordial radiance illuminates. The many creation myths speak of the world emerging as a primordial mound from the abyss of a vast cosmic ocean, and from that central point radiate the gods and all of the informing and creative forces that architect reality. These culture images can be found in many ancient cultures, from Egyptian to Mesopotamian, Abrahamic and Chinese. In all of these cultures there exists a conceptual template of a central locus rising from creative chaos to command the architecture of the known world. And from its centre, atop of the primeval hill, the king rests on his throne as a living reflection of this cosmic culture image. There he directs the creative laws into the four corners of his kingdom, just as the ordering force of the universe, centered and secure, radiates the primordial light that shines and organizes all creation into an order, into a logos, into a kingdom. The quadratic world image is also significant in that it symbolizes the ordering effect of the archetypal pattern. The world image emanates from the center of the primeval hill as a radius intersected by two lines becoming a cross. This image is not only the distillation of the creative order, but also a symbol by which the king shall instruct his life and that of his kingdom into the image of the creative cosmos. So we can see that in traditional societies, the king acts as the earthly representative of the creative cosmos. People rely on the ordering effect of the king, who authorizes new laws into practice that constellate the life systems of the society, which is also a miniaturization of the sky, where above us we see the lights of aeons past, and behind it the vast void ocean from where everything sprang and where everything will inevitably return. What I think is the most interesting thing about this culture pattern is that it indicates an attempt by an organism to devise life systems using the world that it experiences as its template. Many creatures are instinctively motivated by the patterns of natural systems, but the human is the first to actually design extensions of those systems in an intelligent, creative, conceptual way. And the defining structure of traditional societies reflects this. The human mind recognized this ordering effect in creation and, at some level, recognized that pattern within its own nature to design its life systems by that image. Thereby, the king figure as the center of this world image, has to yield his own individuality to the cosmic order. In other words, once a man becomes king, he's no longer merely the individual, but a living articulation of that organizing effect in nature. This is the archaic ideal of royalty. And success is measured against the quality of their psyche and their ability to take the ordering principle of the universe and cast that into societal form. If the king lives a life according to the cosmic principle, then it naturally follows that the kingdom will be sustained and perhaps even evolve. This is what the myths mean by saying that the land and the king are one. The quality of the king cascades into the quality of the realm. If the king is healthy and articulate, then order and creativity flows throughout the domain and confidently meets the problems that lie both within and beyond its borders. But what happens when this is not the case? In the outcome that the king's psyche is overthrown by the corruptions that lie eternally pregnant within human nature, then the creative ordering that is so characteristic of the archetype cannot articulate itself confidently, and this instability at the inner life encourages corruption within the court. This corruption within the center cascades to the level of the court, we could say, and eventually gets codified into the laws that permeate through the entire society, and the society degenerates. All kings are overthrown within themselves before the world finally comes for them. The center eventually collapses, and the air becomes charged with the scent of revolution. The quality of kingship illustrates that there is no disconnect between the quality of the organism and the way that it shapes its environment. But if we truly are now in a globalized world, then that world is now our kingdom. And what does the quality of our stewardship of its life say about the quality of our psyches? When I see the way that the industrial planners have related to the environment, I sense a considerable disconnect. A disconnect from living systems that stems from a pretense that we've conquered nature through technology, and that nature itself is merely another utility within a legion of utilitarian initiatives that are placed solely beneath our command. But the error of this world image is that the quality of relationship defines the quality of the life systems, and even though we may feel very secure behind the walls of our mega citadels called cities, that doesn't mean that we've abstracted ourselves from nature. And if we are irresponsible, as kings sometimes are, then our center will destabilize, and this techtopia, with all of its electronic wonders, will be rendered naught and meaningless in the face of the calamity that grew from the things that we have left unconscious. I want to close this section about the culture image by reading you a passage from the book King, Warrior, Magician, Lover by Robert Moore and Douglas Gillette, where they are illustrating what happens when the center of a world image collapses. It recalls a lamenting passage from an Egyptian prophet called Nefer-Rahu, who lived in the times of the Middle Kingdom. Here he is describing the economic and social calamities that befell Egypt during the reign of kings who didn't live according to the organizing principle of creation. And afterwards he talks about a vision of positive destiny whereby a new king will come and reclaim the center and go about bringing a new world into form. So in his lament, Nefer-Rahu says, Ra must begin the foundation of the earth all over again. The land is completely perished. The sun disk is covered over. It will not shine. The rivers of Egypt are empty. Damaged indeed are those good things, those fish ponds where there were those who clean fish, overflowing with fish and fowl. Everything good has disappeared. Foes have arisen in the east, and Asiatics have come down into Egypt. The wild beasts of the desert will drink at the rivers of Egypt. This land is helter-skelter. Men will take up weapons of warfare, so that the land lives in confusion. Men will make arrows of metal, beg for the bread of blood, and laugh with the laughter of sickness. A man's heart pursues himself alone. A man sits in his corner, turning his back while one kills another. I show thee a son as a foe, the brother as an enemy, and a man killing his own father. And so that's the lamenting aspect. And now I just want to read to you the positive prophetic vision that Neferrahu states here. Then it is that a king will come, belonging to the south, Ameni, the triumphant his name. He is the son of a woman of the land of Nubia. He is the one born in Upper Egypt. He will take the white crown. He will wear the red crown. He will unite the two mighty ones. He will satisfy the two lords with what they desire. The encircler of the fields will be in his grasp. Rejoice, ye people of his time. The son of a man will make his name forever and ever. They who incline towards evil and who plot rebellion have subdued their speech for fear of him. The Asiatics will fall to his sword, and the Libyans will fall to his flame. There will be built the wall under the ruler of life, prosperity, health, and the Asiatics will not be permitted to come down into Egypt, and justice will come into its place, while wrongdoing is driven out. Rejoice he who may behold this. So now that we've accessed the archetype and its primacy and spoken about its culture form as well, I think it's best that we now turn our attention towards a more pragmatic solution. That being, how do we recognize this archetypal pattern in our own lives, and how does it inform us positively? After all, the cultural embodiment of the king archetype should only serve as its most familiar cultural expression. We do not need to become royalty in order to access this pattern within our own lives. In fact, when we know what we're actually looking for, we can see features of the king expression all around us. So how do we recognize a psychological pattern that has come to embody the qualities of this archetype? Well, one area that we could see this is in the workplace. A strong manager who embodies the king in its full expression knows the infrastructure of his organization or his kingdom very well. The very word organization is actually a world image that the structure of the business seeks to emulate. And at the head of that system lies the managerial individual who, with the help of his subordinates, has the responsibility of turning that into a reality. A strong manager leads from the front, has good rapport with every dimension of his workforce, and can act fluidly under conditions of high pressure and stress. The manager who radiates the king expression cascades their confident assertion into all regions of the business, and people who work under them know this effect when they feel it. A king knows how to command obedience from his workforce also through a combination of diplomacy and confident authority. A true king does not need to apply bullying or tyrannizing tactics in order to command obedience from their workforce, nor do they need to coerce them through things like bribes or other deceptive initiatives. These individuals who embody the king expression are confident in their own ability to influence and organize their corporate systems effectively because they've already captured that ability within the system of their own inner life. Likewise, individuals who command smaller businesses as well run group initiatives or even work individually on private projects can all experience an emergence of this archetype. In fact, I would say that the archetype is best directed towards divergent systems with lots of variables and different responsibilities to manage. The king archetype seems to be most at home, or it seems to flourish, shall we say, when it's challenged by the presence of variation and where it can exercise the ability to transform that chaos into an orderly system. This could equally work in the family environment too. A parent contends with chaos on a daily basis, and when a child is born, they have to shed off a lot of previous indulgences and concerns and immature habits in order to create positive systems for the upbringing of this new life. They have more skin in the game, so to speak, when you become a parent. And the archetype has sprung from a wisdom and a self-knowledge that in time can be potentially passed on to organize and inspire the action of this new young developing psyche. Parents who possess a strong presence with this archetype are looked upon by their offspring as reliable and secure, and even if the young mind is too proud to admit it, they are in a deep respect of the virtue that radiates from the parental systems around them. Organization, command, and creativity, these are the key expressions of the king in action. How easy it is to say these words than it is to contemplate the significance of each one and really express them effectively in our lives. We might all have some personal experience with each of these qualities, but if we're being truly honest with ourselves, we can all probably say that we're still getting a lot better at wielding them and definitely harmonizing them together within our own life systems. Likewise, we know that there are strong patterns within our psyche that we struggle to reconcile with. Personal demons, doubts, attachments, all these things that really pull us back from articulating the king archetype, which is why a immediate focus should not really be placed upon the king, but I think on the expressions of the warrior and the magician to achieve the foundation that will foster the emergence of our ever-present potential. This is why the king is associated so strongly with maturity, because its power is very difficult to handle, and like a great oak tree, it takes a long time to grow up and dig its roots in deep and branch outwards towards its own prosperity. So the style of being in the world that we would associate to the king takes a long time to develop and inculcate within us. A child can't harness its effect, and whilst an adolescent might play a convincing job at aping the king sometimes, they simply don't possess the wisdom or the discipline or the life experience to take full command of their own complexity yet, which is why true maturity is not guaranteed by age. People usually manifest the king in their later years, that much is true, but there are also many people who remain in a world of immaturity well into their middle life, and this is because they have not ordered the essential in them. They have gone to work, paid their bills, and they might have even raised and engineered new life into the world. Yet, their personal world remains incomplete. They have accomplished many worthwhile things in life, except bring their own kingdom under order. We see this strongly represented in mythic hero kings such as Marduk, who overcomes the chaotic mother of the universe, which is a dragon named Tiamat. And he doesn't kill Tiamat, which is a common misunderstanding of that myth. He rather simply subsumes her and reconstitutes her form into the image of the new world. The instruction is that the king constellates the beginning of new worlds out of the body of former ages. And in our own lifetime, an immature part of us that has been our world image for some time has to be defeated before the succession of a new order of being and living in the world. We could also see the king as being representative of the organizing effect that typically happens to our minds as we mature. As we finally begin to capture a sense of what we're about in our adolescent stages, that germinates into what we grow into as we mature into our adult years. If we're consistent with our specializations, then we eventually experience a honing of a skill, and that degree of expertise passes from the systems that we work with back into our psyche, because the psyche's been tempered and it's organized itself through an exercisation with those specialized systems. This could be a career, a passion project, or a general fluidity that comes from the continual exercise of one's own abilities. And as this happens, we may feel ourselves becoming quite nostalgic for the flitting years of the past, where things seem a lot simpler, and they definitely were more indulgent. But this is simply a part of our learned behavior that is slowly being overcome by the procession of maturity. It doesn't mean that we have to completely close our doors to the past and give up all of the things that interested us in a prior order of our existence. It simply means that some of the things that we were once concerned with don't take precedence in our lives anymore, and they have to find their rightful place now as previous concerns, previous interests that we have transcended. So as we prioritize our life to higher standards and experience mastery in our specialized areas, we naturally experience a focus and a discipline that we bring to those areas. This also brings with it a newfound confidence in time, because the immature and impulsive side of our nature becomes tempered as it integrates with other aspects of our psyche that mitigate its influence, we could say. This integration continues to grow throughout our life, and when we reach old age, that process slowly begins to calcify even more. This is part of the reason why we notice older people becoming a lot more narrow in their focus, and they orientate themselves around a very minimal set of activities. This isn't simply down to diminished energy. It's because as we get older, we really hone in on a more limited set of variables. And whilst this definitely has some advantages in our young adulthood, this process does eventually become more prominent, and we lose some of that fluidity and dynamism that we possessed in our past. So yeah, we really do begin to calcify as we get older. which is what leads also to the common criticism of older people by the young when they say these people are stuck in their ways. What they're observing is a late stage of development in this solidification process that happens to us in old age, but the hubris of youth prevents these individuals from realizing that this is also going to happen to them eventually. These things all speak closely to the patterning effect that we associate with becoming mature in our own lifetime. But it doesn't mean that we will ever achieve a really powerful expression of it. Many people only become partially mature because they become lazy in luxury, or they're not willing to overcome certain behaviors that retain us in a state of adolescent indulgence and immature concerns. For many people today, myself included, the rate at which patterns of immaturity extend are getting wider and wider and wider. And culture is also a big problem with this. The normalization of self-entitlement and irresponsibility in the culture all eats into an individual's ability to become psychologically mature. Words like discipline, order, and responsibility are often portrayed as if seen through the eyes of a rebellious adolescent as repressive devices that oppress on their ability to seek satisfaction and self-agency in the moment. The irony of this is reflected in how many perpetual adolescents turn to government systems to look after them and provide them with that sense of foundation that their parents gave them in the past. There are so many support systems around us that ask to leech responsibility from the individual and keep them held in a state of perpetual crisis and dependency, a kind of psychological stasis, as it were. These are additional challenges that the psyche has to face as it grapples with its own dynamics and the world around it. I, for one, am confident that even though many people might be lost to these systems, as many people are waking up to the parasitism of their effect and will make strategies to evade them. But even if we might be a generation of late bloomers, then that doesn't mean that we still shouldn't try to overcome our own personal dilemmas with our full energy and seek mastery and organize our lives to a more efficient and definitely a more conscientious level than we have been doing previously. That there really is nothing like becoming more integrated within yourself and seeing that advancement reflected in the life systems around you. The positive affirmation that you receive from exercising your abilities and finding your own voice in the world is really like no other. And when you receive it, your whole body will sing in unison because it's telling you that the psyche is evolving and it sees itself reflected in the life systems that you are designing. The king archetype is the yield of a labor that spans over many decades. It is the expression of the living psyche's motivation towards integration and the sign of a deep flourishing that has taken years to mature. To become a king is a life process that provides a united image to the organic developments that churn deeply within us all. Words cannot fully contain it. Money cannot buy it. It is simply a part of the germinating process that migrates us from stage to stage, across threshold after threshold, until we finally unite under the conditions that have taken us a lifetime to master. Its world image of king and kingdom is an ideal reflection of a secure and confident psyche with bridges connected to all chambers and to its innermost depths. From this image, a new world is formed. So that's it wrapped up then for the King archetype. I've really enjoyed making this video. It's probably been the longest archetype video that I've made so far. It certainly had the greatest deal of investment because, like I said at the beginning, it is a major archetype, so you can't really do something like this justice in a short 20-minute video, I don't think. So I hope that you've really enjoyed this video, and I just wanted to say one thing in closing, because today when I was actually editing this video, I was thinking about the archetypes and how I've been successful or how I've not been successful about delivering these concepts to you. And I was thinking about how really important it is to try and emphasize these things, not so much as just these abstractions that we can hold in our minds, these items of intellectual curiosity that we can mull over, but actually see them a lot more dynamically than that. See them as actually akin to being living things, living in the sense that they are part of the composition of our living organism, and therefore they're not, when we hold them in the mind as these abstract things, that isn't really the best way to think about them, because they actually move and they articulate themselves in a dynamic way, just like we do. So I really wanted to implore that at the end, so just in case that you want to watch this video again or any of my other videos in the Archetype series, just to try and really have the right kind of frame of mind when going into these kind of things, because I don't want there to be any major confusion about the essential qualities of these psychological concepts. So yeah, I think we'll call it a day with this one. Thank you very much for watching this, and as usual, I'll see you again.